Okay, guys. So I was just going to show you there, but I won't bother because it'll take too long to log in. You can download videos of like the slides and audio to go with them of the last time this module ran. So you can get those if you go to the iTunes music store as if you were going to buy a song. If you do a search for SOFT6008, there may be a few of those, but you'll find mine anyway. It's easy enough to find. I'm tempted to say, but of course it'll be much better this semester, you know, but it's not going to be very different or spectacularly better this semester than last semester. So that's a good resource for you there if you want to go get those. Just if you want to maybe preview what's going to come up, or I mean, I hasten to say if you don't get something, you know, maybe I said it differently last time out this semester ran, and then you could understand it by hearing it explained a different way. But to be honest, if I explain something and you don't get it, hearing me explain it again probably isn't going to make a whole lot of difference. But anyway, it's there as a resource. As you're aware, I'm recording these classes, but I haven't really figured out a good place to put them yet, or a way to put them there. YouTube doesn't like them. There's some funny format thing going on, so we'll have to see what happens. I'm gonna have to recode them all, but that's just time consuming. So maybe by the time we're finished, I'll get time to actually put them all somewhere, which won't be a whole lot of use then. So I'll see what I can do. Now, we're going to look at another example of something today. We're going to start looking at user input validation, which is one of the main things that you do with JavaScript. So for example, when you go to a website and you put in a credit card and you make a mistake and it goes, that's wrong, you know, there's a mistake there or something. That's usually some user input validation at work there. So we see how that kind of thing works. So that's what we're leading up to. I just want to show you just so you can use them because they're handy. They're handy for debugging and handy for quickly testing functions and things. We're going to look at some alerts and dialogues. However, in much the same way as once you start using the DOM, you're not really interested in document.writes anymore. To a large extent, once you start using the DOM, you're not really interested in alerts and prompt boxes and stuff. But they are useful, okay? So JavaScript can pop up windows, and the way these look will depend on the operating system. So these are services provided by the operating system to JavaScript. So if you want to get, you know, some information from someone, you can pop up a prompt box, for example, and it'll give them some input. No. So if in JavaScript you say alert, and then you pass in a string, that'll appear on the screen. As you know, pop-ups are really, really annoying. So you probably will be using these as debugging tools or something. Do you know what I mean? So if you're testing to see if a condition, you're not sure if a particular condition is triggered, well, you could put in an alert, so then you'll know that part of the if statement was actually used. This alert isn't actually going to alter the running of the program. It's just going to get your attention and pause things until you click OK. And they don't accept any input. You can't give the JavaScript program any information using them. It's just one way. So that can be handy. I mean, it can also be handy. You know, if you really want to get the user's attention, you know, this would do it. But they're very annoying. So we tend not to use them when we actually publish the website. But there may be scenarios where they're warranted. A confirm box will actually evaluate to something that the program can use. So here you could say var name equals confirm your credit card will be charged. Now name is a stupid name for that variable. See, I was copying and pasting. So it'll evaluate to true if OK is clicked, and it'll evaluate to false otherwise. So it pops up, the person clicks OK or they don't, and then you have a value in that variable that you can do something with. Again, once you're using the DOM though, once you're using the document object model, this kind of thing becomes less important. The prompt box, it'll evaluate whatever the user inputs. And the second parameter there can appear in the text box by default. You might want to do that, for example, if you're looking for someone's phone number and they're not sure whether it should be in 087-1234567 format or whether it should be like +353-87-1234567 format. Well, you could put one or the other in there and that would make it clear then what was expected. So the first parameter is what appears in the prompt box, and then if you put in a second parameter, it'll actually appear as the input. Yes, sir?
On some of those before, they usually have like text in the back that would like be kind of faded, but when you click on it, that would go away, kind of telling you what to do. Is there any way you can do that?
Say again now?
It's kind of like if you're on a website and they say that,
yeah.
you know, when you're entering your username or password or something, you would like say in the text box username and password, but it'd be kind of like faded text.
Right, right. You'd probably be using the DOM if you're doing that. So these are provided by the operating system. If you were like dealing with stuff on a form on a page, that'll be all forms and the document object model and stuff. So like I said, we probably won't use these ones. I love the prompt box for debugging because you can put your value in as the suggested parameter. So if you're going to like put in a credit card number and you're going to have to enter it 100 times an hour, you know, to see if your program's working, you could just put it in as the second parameter and then it's in there when you go to click and it saves you time. So this code here just prompts a person for their name and then says, provided they enter a name, it'll say hello and their name. So it would prompt you saying, if you enter Colin, it will say hello Colin. If you don't put in a Colin, if you don't put in a name, it won't say hello, it'll just say thanks for visiting the website. So just look at this piece here. If name is not equal to null and name is not equal to empty. So one is if the string, the second part there is if the string is empty, you're not going to do anything. But of course an empty string is a string, it's just the empty string. Null is like a non-value, you know, a non-value. If they, for example, clicked away off the box, you might get null in there. No, just want to quickly go through some of the structures in data scripts that you might end up using. They are very like, I think they're very like Java and very like C in places, you know, so they should be all fairly familiar. I find the syntax of JavaScript a bit cryptic at times, but most people your age are used to it. I'm old-fashioned. No. So here we have a while loop. Now, so you'll say while, and then you'll have a condition, a Boolean condition, and as long as that condition is true, it'll keep doing what's in the code part. So here we're saying while top is not equal to null and it's not blank. So if it's not null and if it's not blank. So basically you ask them for a number. If they put in the number, then you're going to go round and round and round and round doing document.writes of n until n gets to be, as long as n is less than or equal to top, you'll keep going. Now this obviously calls for a for loop, this particular objective here. So it's not a great example. The do while then, okay, is always, it's the same idea, but this is a post-test loop. So you have a pre-test loop and a post-test loop. Basically, loop is going around and round and round and round and round and round and round, and it keeps going as long as some condition is, something is true. The question then is, do you check to see if it's true and then go around again and check to see if it's true and if it's go around again, or do you do it and then check if you go back up again and then do it and check if you go back up again. So some loops test before you go in and do the thing, and some loops test after you've done it, do you go around again. You just have to be careful that you're picking the one that you want, because this loop will always be executed at least once. So whatever's in the statement there, that will always be executed at least once. But otherwise it's the same. And of course a while loop and a repeat loop are largely the same. Just one has a while and one is an until. No. You're familiar with loops already. The syntax then for for loop in JavaScript, you have 3 sections there. You initialize your counter to be whatever. Then you have a halting condition, and then you have the increment. So this is incrementing by 1, isn't it? You could say int a plus 2 or something, or int a plus 7 if you have a mind. Generally though, your for loops will just be counting up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So that's what a for loop looks like in JavaScript. We saw rollovers already. Now, so now I want to look at, no, I don't want to look at that at all. No. So here we have a program where we're prompting for a mobile phone number. And then if you put in a valid number, it says, I like the look of that number. Let's have a look at that code. So there's some string chopping elements in here which are useful. So the first thing we're doing is we're creating a new Boolean variable that's true, and we're assigning this to the variable valid. So we're creating a new variable object, a new Boolean object, and we're making it true to begin with, and we're assigning that to valid. Now, the way this code is designed is you set valid to true at the beginning, and then if there's any one reason, if you discover any one reason why the number is dodgy, or any one part of the number is dodgy, then the whole number is dodgy. That's not the same as going through the number part by part, and if you find any one part of it being good, then the whole thing is good. But if you find any one part of it is bad, then the whole thing is bad. And doing it this way, step by step, is, I think, preferable to one big huge if statement where you're saying, well, if this is true, and then 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 this is true, then the number's okay. That could be very unwieldy. So what has to be true for the number to be valid? So it has to be 10 characters long, and the first 2 digits have to be 0, 8, and the third digit has to be a 3 or a 5, a 6 or a 7, or a 9, actually, for Tesco Mobile. And of course, they all have to be number characters. So this wouldn't take an American style number where it's like 087 hot babe or something. Do you know? Just numbers. Okay? So let's have a look at this then step by step. So here, we're just prompting for the phone number. And we're also using the second parameter to provide an example of what it should look like. No, first off, if it's an empty string or a null string. So if there's no, if it's not a string at all, if they didn't put in anything, If that value is null, well then that's not valid. Now, an empty string is not the same as a null string, so you want to check also if it's a string with nothing in it, as opposed to a non-string. If that's the case, it's not valid. So if either of those, then it's dodgy. And we say valid equals false. Now you'll notice, in terms of the structure, the overall structure of this code, nowhere do we ever say it might be true. So we set it up as being default to true at the start, and then if we find a reason to knock it down, it stays knocked down. Like, it would be totally wrong to say somewhere else, you know, if it starts then with 08, it's okay. No, if it doesn't start with 08, it's not okay. But that's not the same thing as if it starts with 08, it is okay. So we set it up as true, and then we throw tests at it, and if one of them knocks it down, it stays down. Here we're checking that the length of the string is in fact 10 characters long. So if it's not 10 characters long, then it's dodgy. So if you meet a beautiful person in the bar and they tell you their phone number is 087123456, you wait for the last digit. It could be modern day Cinderella. The prince didn't hear the last digit of the phone number and searches the land. Now, here we're checking to see if the first two characters of that string are 08. Because as you know, all Irish mobile phone numbers start with 0 and 8. Now this slice is a string chopping up thing. Okay? And all strings in JavaScript, you start counting at 0. Pretty much everything you do in JavaScript, if it's an array and you're counting through, you start with 0. So frustratingly, for example, January is month 0, not month 1, which can cause major confusion. So this is saying, now slice is funny. You're looking at this, you might say, okay, what slice does is you give it the parameter, the first parameter is the starting position, and then the second parameter is the length of the chunk that you want, but that's not the case. If you're saying slice 02, you're saying I want to take a chunk of that string that's got character 0 and character 1. If you say slice 5, it's character 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the second parameter is the last character you want to extract plus 1. The reason is that next time round, okay, if you're chopping up a string, if you're chopping up something into little slices, okay, into little chunks, right? Next time out, then the start of the new thing would be 2. Do you know what I mean? So you'd go from 0 to 2, and then from 2 to 10, and then from 10 to 15, and the next time out, then 15 to whatever. So the idea is that that would be helpful to the programmer or something. I think someone was high when they came up with that. That's just stupid. But anyway, I didn't make JavaScript. When I am king, you know, JavaScript will be first against the wall. No. Okay. So you can see here then, the next thing then we're doing is we're taking C equals mobile num dot slice 2, 3. So this is going from character 2, starting at character 2, extract a string and stop before you get to 3. So basically just gives us character number 2. Remember now we're counting from 0, so character number 2 is the 3 or the 5 or the 7, and the 083, 085, 086 or 087. Now to be complete, you'd want to put an 089 facility in there as well for Tesco Mobile. Are there any others? Anybody come across any others? I think that's it. 088, you see, was the analog one from a long, long time ago. So they haven't started using those numbers yet. I suppose they'll start using those last when they run out. But the original mobile phones were 088. So if it's not a 3 or a 5 or a 6 or a 7, then it's false. Now when we see it written down, and when I say it, it makes complete sense. But actually, to compose that if statement could be quite tricky, you know, if you're staring at a blank screen. Very often when you're trying to look for the condition, sometimes it's easier to figure out the exact opposite of what it is you want and then slap a not in front of it. So, like if it's a 3 or a 5 or a 6, it's okay. And then if it's not that, it's not okay. Now, see, to say something like if it's not a 3 and it's not a 5 and it's not a 6 and it's not a 7, then it's false. That's wrong, isn't it? Or is it?
Those are ors, aren't they?
Those are ors, yeah. But see, it's oring the whole thing. So if it's not, sorry, if it's notting the whole thing. So if it's not a 3 or a 5 or a 6 or a 7, then it's bad. So like I said, seeing that there now, it looks great. I guarantee if you had to write that down now in a minute, you know, from a blank sheet of paper, starting from scratch, it could be tricky. Like I said, to be complete, you'd want to put an 089 in there. Then we have our for loop. So you see, we went from 2 to 3, so now we can start talking about from 3 on here. So I think that's what the designers of JavaScript had in mind when they came up with that +1 scheme. No. We're going to go from 3 to 10. We're not actually going to get to 10. There are 10 characters in the string. The last one is character number 9, because you got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9. Okay? 10 characters in the string. So we don't quite get to 10. And we're going up by 1 each go. So we're saying this C here is, we're basically saying it's the nth character. So we make a slice, we start to slice at character number n, but stop before we get to n+1. So it's just a 1 character slice. So we're just lifting out the nth character as we go. And then again we're saying if it's the character is less than the character 0 and it's greater than the character 9, if any of those things are true, then it's dodgy. So it must be a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, or an 8, or a 9. If it's not one of those things, so if it's a letter, for example, then it's dodgy.
Does that do a numeric comparison, or is it like
No.
ASCII?
It's comparing the ASCII values. There's a cautionary tale there in that if you're sloppy, a lot of the time you won't know whether you're dealing with a string or a number in JavaScript. And 9 times out of 10, that's fine. But the string 35 is less than string 5, for example. Whereas the number 35 is greater than the number 5. So there are times that it'll make a difference, so you need to be careful. In this case, we're dealing with strings. Now, I wasn't very explicit about these being strings. I can show you another class how you can just force the input, which is what you should do when you take your input in from the prompt. You should force it to be a string just to be on the safe side. There's a function you can use that will force something to be a string or to be a number. Also, it might have made sense to nest these various parts so that one was inside and the other. So, for example, you know, if there's no input, why are we doing all these fabulous tests on it to see if it's 10 characters long? It's not there. Do you know? So it might make sense, for example, to check first to see if it's actually already false and then not do all these tests. It seems to me that that's a surefire way to make the thing crash, you know. I mean, you're counting up to the 10th character when there may be none. So that could be problematic. But I didn't want us to get bogged down in nested ifs and stuff and get complicated. So here then we're saying if it's valid, yip-de-doo, that's a valid phone number. And if it's not, it's saying that's not a valid phone number. Yeah, any questions on that? So it's not, the individual parts I think are straightforward enough. You're going to do a lot of this slicing and dicing of strings. So make your peace with slice now. It's not pretty, but you're stuck with it. Okay. There's also splice. One of them is destructive. So one of them will actually destroy the string that you're talking about. So splice is destructive. I won't leave it a mystery. So this chopping up the strings and stuff, you're going to be doing a lot of that. So you need to get comfortable with that. And then really it's just all the individual parts. I think you shouldn't underestimate though the importance of the overall structure. So you set it up to be true by default, then you fire tests at it, and if one of them hits and it falls down, it's false, and it stays down. If you put somewhere some code that might make it come back up again, then you're totally screwed. And sometimes framing the questions so that they come out in the format that you need then can be troublesome. Any questions on any of that? So this is one of the things we do a lot of in JavaScript. This is the main thing JavaScript is used for. Checking user input. So we'll talk a bit more about that in some other classes. I mean, I showed you stuff in the DOM the last class. Now I'm showing you checking some user input to see if it's valid. That's the whole module there now. That's it. That's all we're going to be doing, is those two things. Fiddling with the document object model and checking user input to see if it's okay. I tell you, I will do one more thing. We'll also do some cookies, just see how they work. But that's it there now. That's the module in a nutshell. And that's pretty much all we use JavaScript for. Tweaking the appearance of the page after it's been drawn. Checking user input just to make sure it looks right before we send it off wherever it's going. And obviously use JavaScript to fiddle with cookies as well. But that's all people do in JavaScript. And that's all we're going to do in JavaScript. The rest then is actually just getting on with it. As you saw in the labs, it's a bit of a fiddly language, you know. It can be a bit tricky to debug and it's not very forgiving and stuff. But that's all we're going to do. Just more of this kind of stuff. So any questions now on any of that?
Can you show set bar valid new Boolean statement there?
Yep. Boolean after George Boole. The only Cork person more famous than Roy Keane. I think they're rebuilding it. Well, are they rebuilding his house or tearing it down? They're doing something to it anyway. Did you see it? Across from the well. Yes.
Aren't blank variables true or false by default? Which one is it?
If you create a new Boolean, is it true or false by default? Probably.
So if it's true by
Do you
default, you could just get rid of that entire line.
I could, yeah. And risk my whole program on that thing I'm not sure about. But yeah, it's probably false by default, but I don't know. I have no idea. You wouldn't want to risk it anyway, do you know? Or it might be true by default in Netscape and or in Firefox and false by default in Internet Explorer or something. Who knows? That's the kind of thinking now that makes planes fall out of the sky.
You know that slice statement as well?
Yeah.
You use that for like alpha characters and other symbols, to slice.
Yeah, slice would be used for strings and strings only. If you wanted to do the equivalent of slice, for example, on a number, I mean, if you wanted to know the last two digits of a number, but it was a number, it wasn't a string, you'd be doing something with, say, a mod. If you do, if you did 90210 mod 100, you get 10, wouldn't you? You get the 10. Yeah. So this is just for strings. If you're going to be doing, if you want to do something similar with numbers, you'd use maths to do it. Or you'd probably just cheat and convert the number to a string and then use the string things you used to. But that's just slice. Slice is just for strings. Yep.
That bit of code is accepting data input.
Yeah. So I'll show you. I'll run it again there now. So when you run the program, it prompts for the number. And if we say something like that, it should have a tizzy fit. Okay. Saying it's not a valid number. If we do something like, just leave it short. It's not valid. If we say something, no, a sensible program, right? If you're doing this, if this was taking input from a web page, right? It's not enough to say to the user, that's wrong, feck off. Like, you need to actually, if you know it's wrong because the network part is wrong, there's 088. You could say, that's wrong because, there is no 088 network or something. Yes, sir.
Can we make the prompt box to allow it only to enter the numbers?
Can you make a prompt box that only allows you to enter numbers? No. I mean, you can make a prompt box that will take in a string and then you can do various things based on that. You can't make a prompt box that would only take numbers. Now, you may be able to make a form element in HTML5 and say that has to be a number. And if it doesn't fit the format, then HTML5 might have a tizzy fit on your behalf before it ever gets to JavaScript. That's another day's work, though. So you can insist that someone puts in only a number, by doing things if they don't. But the prompt box itself doesn't care. Has that answered your question? I'm not sure. I didn't really understand the question. Sorry. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll leave it there. So great stuff, guys. Thank you.